Good afternoon. My name is Robert Walker, and I'm Brand Manager for RetirementHomes.com. Welcome to our August webinar. We are North America's leading online sales and marketing solutions provider, including our housing directory, our online library, and e-newsletters. We also offer, free of charge to senior living professionals, the top experts in senior living every month who will share their knowledge in the fields of marketing, research, sales, and related areas in webinars such as the one you're about to hear. This month, we welcome back Janice Ewers of the Ewers Group. Janice's presentation, Handling Negative Media Coverage, will provide the basics to crisis communications and reputations management. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. If you would like a question answered, raise your hand in the toolbar to the right, type in the question, and time permitting, it will be answered at the end of the session. And of course, you are also welcome to ask a question anytime during the presentation itself. Now here's Janice.
Robert, thank you so much, and I also want to extend thanks to RetirementHomes.com for inviting me to do this webinar today. I think when we think about negative publicity and negative media, this quote from Abraham Lincoln really holds true. We read and listen to bad news every day, and as much as we are a very forgiving group of people, we really seem to thrive on the bad news. There was an expression years ago that today's newspaper wraps tomorrow's garbage. But today, with social media and the internet, this situation has really changed. Today's news is forever news. With digital and the ability to store articles online, anyone can search and in an instant read the news from today as well as years ago. Senior communities not desiring to use social media on Facebook or Twitter may still be the subject on or about others on other social media outlets. So just because you say you don't want to be on Facebook, you still may be. So how do you handle crisis and potential negative media coverage that could be generated by a community? Well, I think this dear situation really illustrates that communities of any size and any location can face a crisis. And this was a small community that, unbelievably enough, the deer ran into the building. So it's important to always think about what is a crisis. And it can be big or it can be very small. It can be traumatic and stressful to residents and employees. It can be seen, or it can be a very quiet situation, but it's still, ultimately, it could be a crisis. It could involve conflict as well as drama. I want to concentrate my comments today on the media and the communication side, but it also, in any type of crisis communication, it also involves operation. And there's an awful lot of overlap, especially in smaller communities. Every crisis affects various audiences. So it's residents, it's your management, staff, and employees, your families of residents, the families as well as management, staff, and employees, the external community, your potential referral sources, and just your general community at large, and the media. And it's important in any crisis that you determine which audiences are affected, because your communication methods will be maybe different to how each approach the crisis. And when you're brainstorming with your staff, I think it's important to separate out potential crisis areas and situations. And I find this helpful, that there's your building and physical plant. We also have natural disasters. There's crisis situations that can occur with residents and also employees. And we were brainstorming, and these are just a few that would fall under these sorts of things. And in my career, unfortunately, I have had picketers and protesters, a kidnapping, drowning, a gentleman who used to flash golfers on a golf course from his balcony. So, you know, each were affecting different audiences, but these were some of the crises that were really real that could occur. Every crisis has a stage. It goes through various stages. You have a crisis occur and then the potential of an information gap. So on the positive side, in your stages of a crisis, people want factual information. They want reassurance. They want to be provided information. And there's communication. They're able to learn what's going on or get some information. Therefore, when you have this flow of information in a timely basis, you have positive outcomes. And you can turn around a crisis and possibly have very strong positive outcomes. Your reputation is enhanced by the way you've handled the crisis. And your enhanced public awareness could really benefit your business. I think in the case of airlines that have encountered crashes and accidents, I think you see the way they've handled these crises and how it turns around and it's ultimately positive. On the opposite side is the bad news spiral. There's too little or the wrong information is provided, and it starts to spiral. Inconsistent information starts trickling out, and the information that is getting out there is uncontrolled. So rumors start, there's escalating rumors, there's general confusion. And then what happens is your reputation is eroding as a result of this information that's getting out. There could possibly be reputation damage. And before long, your community could be said, oh, that was that community, or that was that company, or that was that restaurant. So it's that damage that becomes so difficult that in some cases there are public relations consultants that could recommend, you know, this can't even be fixed. You have to change the name. And I was thinking recently of the airlines that now there's, I think it's either Spirit or one of the airlines changed their name, and now instead of ValueJet, which was the plane that crashed in the Everglades, now it's AirTran, and we don't even remember ValueJet. So this is the stages of a crisis that a community could go through. And I think last summer we had this example with Hurricane Sandy. In the case of a hurricane, this should be something that is planned for in advance. And living in South Florida, I'm particularly sensitive to this. But you need to determine how information will be disseminated to the various audiences. People will want to know what's going to happen in that case of the hurricane. Last summer, the power was out, the phones weren't working, and smartphones were the best option people had. What information will be disseminated, and who and how will this be, how will it be, the information be disseminated, and who will the spokesperson be? We were working with a community, and the management staff, including the executive director, had their hands full with a myriad of operational challenges. The employees were doing a fantastic job caring for their residents, and yet they did not want to make themselves available to the media or even make a statement on Facebook or do a press release about what was happening at that community. The rumors swirled as disgruntled adult children shared their frustration on the internet. And then, as with most crises, there's always the problem solvers. And in this case, the problem solvers were on the internet offering any number of suggestions, from dropping off food to food and blankets for the residents. Well, neither the food nor blankets were a problem, but it was just people want to help solve problems. And then people will express their dissatisfaction on the internet regardless whether you want them to or not. And so it's better to plan for these potential rants on Facebook and blogs. We often have the tendency to refute bad news. Oh, that didn't happen, and make excuses and not acknowledge the customer. A customer gets frustrated. This is a small crisis, but it's a big turnoff when you tell the customer they were wrong or the staff isn't responsible and no one apologizes. You cannot bury your head in the sand and hope these things will go away, because they don't. A customer is turned off when no appropriate action is offered, and the customer, isn't asked what would make them happy. So this is that spiraling that I mentioned that can erode reputation. In crisis planning, and I know most, if not all, communities have crisis plans, but it's important that your crisis plan also really accomplish designating that spokesperson. And there's trial runs and practices not only for what's going to happen on the operations side, but what's going to happen to dealing with the media. There should be somebody that's going to be responsible for the media and social media. And the spokesperson, who hopefully is your executive director, but if for some reason they don't want to be the spokesperson, someone needs to be designated in advance who will speak on behalf of that community. And it's very important, if there's a management company in place, that it's someone from the management company or it's the executive director, but having it trickle down so that your spokesperson is a director of sales and marketing. I think this is the time when your executive director and your upper levels really need to step forward and be available. Someone needs to be able to spend the time to respond to the media and work and prepare that information that goes out. So every community needs a media policy and how they're going to handle requests. A media policy specifies how the media requests are handled and who speaks on behalf of the community. It guards the privacy of residents as well as employees. And it has a guideline for how people can come in and photograph and film. It spells out the guidelines for talking with the media, and it spells out the guidelines for someone within the company seeking media coverage. So just as you're planning for a negative situation or a crisis, you should also plan for good news. But people need to know who is going to call the reporters and tell them about something rather than any employee. A media policy specifies the spokesperson. It is okay to have a media policy and carry it with you. Type it out and carry it with you so that if you're called in the middle of the night, and I would say the majority of crises occur in the middle of the night, have that media policy tucked into your wallet and be able to read it. Now, a media kit is organized, and it could just be a fact sheet, but it prepares all of the facts and figures of the community so that, and it's the background, so that if somebody is writing something, you can give them the sheet of paper or refer to it or email it to them so they know how big is the community, how many 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms are there, how many employees there are. So all this does is organize the information. If there's a corporate address, it has that. And it's good to know where that is and have it available so that you can email it to someone. Your media resources, you need to be prepared in good news as well as bad to know who your local reporters are and who would you go to in case you have a crisis. So have a list of your local media, their 24-hour hotlines, their email addresses. And if they have Facebook pages, it's good to have those too. Your social media plan and policy, Smartphones one day may be the only source of communication you have, so it's important to plan in advance who will post to your Facebook pages, who is going to monitor these pages. And if you use Twitter or want to use Twitter, then someone should be a qualified writer, because when you only have 160 characters, and that's not 160 words, it takes a real specialist to be able to get that information out there. And we mentioned that every crisis situation may differ in the communication required and the priorities. Every audience needs information, and I'll give you an example. In a community, let's say there's a fire in the kitchen. No one was hurt, there's no significant damage in the building, but the fire trucks arrived, and many residents saw the firemen in the building. So the crisis communication the audiences would include the residents and employees, but some of these other audiences may not be affected. And this situation would be to inform people that everything is okay, and that things have been taken care of. Being proactively prepared means that in any crisis situation, you're going to have people in charge who are going to assess the situation. And if you're going to anticipate negative publicity, then you're prepared. And we talked about your audiences. You're going to determine the audiences affected. You have to gather the facts and analyze to be able to counter any negative publicity with factual, relevant information. You're developing your talking points and messages. And we'll talk about that in a minute as the webinar goes on. But it's important to anticipate any tough questions the media will ask. They are investigative reporters by nature. These aren't the people that come out and write happy stories about your community. So they're going to want to ask the difficult things that you really don't want to mention. And your spokesperson has to be out there. First and foremost, they have to be available to residents and families. Years ago, or you might see it on TV, where they hold up their hand and say, no comment to the media. Well, that's one of the worst things you can possibly say. You can say that you don't have the information and you'll get back to them. But to say no comment just fuels their fire. If there is a crisis at the community and it's your company's policy that the executive director or the administrator is not the spokesperson, then it's perfectly acceptable to tell a reporter, it's our company's policy to refer all media inquiries to, let's say, corporate communication with a name, and help them reach that person. Follow through with this, because their request won't go away. Also, get a reporter's name and their contact information and ask their deadline, so that when you pass along this request to your corporate office, they're aware that there is a deadline. And that's really important, because they're going to write that story no matter what. So you're implementing your media request policy, and then you have to weather the storm. A company president can't be available to only share good news. And I want to remind people of the Carnival Cruise situation when the chairman wasn't available to returning passengers. Whereas on Norwegian Caribbean, the chairman or the president was right there to meet the ship. He knew that there was bad news, but he needed to weather the storm and show people that he cared. The key message is, people need to know that your residents are your #1 concern, and what you are doing at the community should also always stress the concern for the safety and well-being of residents. When we speak about talking points when you talk to the media, you want to keep it simple. You want to just be prepared to answer what I call the 4 W's and the H. So you want to be able to say what happened, when it happened, where, who was affected, how, to the best of your ability. It's important to acknowledge the crisis and explain what the community is doing to help residents. It's also important to apologize. It may be important to share with the person who's requesting information your company's business policies, if applicable, how you handle certain situations. So let's say you have an outbreak of a norovirus. That easily could be taken to the media and reported as negative and try to generate negative media coverage. Well, you should be able to explain how you handle this, what sort of policies go into effect, what you do to control the people coming in and out during the norovirus crisis. So it's just important to keep people informed and be honest and open. You also need to understand that there are some people who will rant. They will never be satisfied. But you need to make sure that they know that you tried, or that people know that you tried, rather than ignore them. And in communications, people don't need to know everything, but it's important that you keep it simple and clear, stick to the facts, and you only are sharing the information that is helpful to someone. You make sure your crisis team has the same information available. This also helps in avoiding the spiraling of rumors. You keep it very consistent with 4 to 5 key talking points. And here again, people know that your spokesperson is the person who disseminates the information. It's very important that a quick timetable be used and you respond as quickly as possible, even if you don't have all the facts at one time, because speed is of the essence. In some situations, it could be such a significant crisis that it's important to consult with your legal counsel before making any statements. The other is there are specialists that you might be using, let's say, in a remediation, that you can also bring those in and give the media them as a resource as well. I think if you go to your Facebook content and read Southwest Airlines, you'll see what they post regarding an emergency. They provide the facts without glossing over any information. Tips in dealing with the media, I think it's important to always remember this is their job, just like what you are doing is yours. So they're going to report a story whether you speak to them or not. They'll get the information somehow. Also, newspapers win awards for their investigative reporting. They feel that it is their responsibility to report and to help people who don't have a voice. And if you want to pick up your daily newspaper and look at your front page and look at the front page of your local section, and I think you will see that there is news about people who are down and out, who are suffering, and this is what they want to write. When you go in front of a reporter, you talk to a reporter, it's important to be prepared and stay on point. Media training tries to help people understand that it's good to just answer that reporter's question and then pause and stop. When you start elaborating, and it's everyone's tendency, we're talking, we're nervous, they're asking us questions, we want to win them, we want to win them over and have them our friend, but this is when you get in trouble, because this blah, blah, blah is when you really can bury yourself. A good tip when being interviewed is to listen to the question and repeat it. It gives your brain time to sort of sort through your answer. And it's okay to say, I'm not able to provide that information. I don't have it available at this time. If saying this is honest, and you can easily say you're waiting on police reports, you're working with your consultants, and you'll get back to them. It's much better than here again saying no comment. If there's bad news, you try to balance it with good, such as, we incurred extensive damage in the kitchen from the fire this morning, but no one was injured. We've made arrangements for food to be brought to the community, and all of our meals will continue as usual. So that's balancing good news with bad. You provide a positive perspective. While we are prepared for crisis situations, this is what you could say, while we're prepared for a crisis situation, never in our 30 years of operation have we tackled hurricane damage to this extent. Please bear with us. We're taking our residents of our first concern, and we have our staff here 24/7 to be available to our residents. You can also refer to local agencies for information and provide the police chief's number or the Red Cross. So understand that the media will find the information and they will be going to the authorities. And there's some information that the authorities can release regardless whether you like it or not. A media statement, depending on the severity of the situation, a media statement might be warranted. This should be clear, factual, and to the point, and use what we call the CRA technique. This keeps you on target, and this is the same media statement that can be used on Facebook. So a CRA technique is using what we call context, regret, and action. So like I mentioned, in the past 5 years, we've been operating communities. We've never had a situation like that. Regret would be our main concern is for our residents. We're working with authorities. We're working with specialists. On action, we're reviewing our procedures and meeting with employees to make sure this does not happen again. I'll read you another sample. In 30 minutes or less following an incident, this could be a media statement, and you can go online and find samples. First and foremost, I want to emphasize that our most important priority is the safety and well-being of the community members involved. We're working closely with local authorities right now to find out exactly what has happened, why it happened, and what, if any, action needs to be taken. Right now, we do not know the cause of the incident. All we know is that, and you would fill that in. It is our firm intention to give you the most accurate information possible as soon as we can. And if you have somebody that is working with the media, you would give them their name. They will get back to you as soon as we have more details. And you have to make sure that that is what's going to happen. Information will also be posted at our website and provide the web address for all concerned individuals as soon as it becomes available. Now, that would be 30 minutes or less following an incident. Then 2 to 4 hours following, when you've had an opportunity to assess the situation, then you would come back with a media statement that would be, we have been working closely with local authorities since the incidents occurred a few hours ago. Although we do not yet fully understand the scope of the incident, we do know, and you would fill that in. We expect more accurately to understand the cause and implications of the event as we continue our investigation. As we move forward with the investigation, we will, and you would insert what you would do. It is our firm intention to continue to give you the most accurate information possible as soon as we can. And our website has now been updated with the most current information. We will continue to update the site as new information becomes available. So that is what you could have available. That's what you should be carrying with you in case you are the spokesperson and someone at your community calls at 2 o'clock in the morning and tells you what the crisis is. In dealing with the newspapers, these are also some other tips. You can't see an article in advance. You can, though, ask before someone talks to the media if you could have an idea of the questions they would be asking. So you could prepare in that regard. Regardless whether you are one of the biggest advertisers or you plan to be the biggest advertisers, you can't play what I call the advertising trump card. Advertising and the editorial side of the paper are two different entities, and it's sort of never the twain shall meet. So you can't say that because you're an advertiser, they aren't going to print bad news about you. You can provide press releases and media statements. And this is the good thing about that is that you can control that. There's also opportunities to write letters to the editor. And many times people forget this vehicle. And we talked about having a press kit. This helps them do their job. So it gives them the most accurate information so that they aren't having to look up things about your community. No matter how friendly a reporter is, I think it's a good thing to realize that they simply are not your friend. They are trying to their job is to sell newspapers, and tragedy, negative publicity, that helps sell their papers. That helps get readership. People don't want to read good news. And today in the Miami Herald, the headlines were hundreds killed. No merger could send industry spiraling about the negative airlines industry. And then this is another article about someone who was killed, and another one about an alleged plotter, a loving, abrasive husband. Then another one about an aide who's being fired for negative slurs. So this is what they like to write about, and you aren't going to change that. You're going to need to work within their scope. Another thing to also remember is that a good reporter uses this he said, she said technique to fan the fire. And unfortunately, I learned this firsthand when we had picketers at an event. And the reporter would talk to the president of the company that I was working for and take down all the information and then go over to the picketers and then say, well, the president of the company said this, this, and this. What do you think? And so they continued to fan this fire. So this is the problem when we could have made a media statement instead of being interviewed right on the spot. And we talked a little bit about media policy. You can guard your residents and your employees' privacy. If it's information about a crime, it's better that the police make this information available. And you can say this is your policy to not provide this information. You can also control the media walking through the building. This is someone's private residence, and you don't allow really anyone walking through your building at any time. So they can be kept outside, and I think that's important to think about. And that goes back to your operations planning. We talked about your spokesperson, and I also think that it's important to log all of your media inquiries. Know who has been to your community or who's been calling. And if a newspaper doesn't sound legitimate, call them, ask for their name and telephone number and their email address, and call them back. Make sure they really do work for that paper, and make sure you know who you are speaking to. In social media and crisis communication, this is so important today that you take control of the situation. using social media. Use your Facebook and blog to put those updates out there, and Twitter if available. The internet is the third most popular way for people to gather emergency information, and 18% of the population, it's been found, will be using Facebook to get their updates. So be sure that somebody knows what they can post to Facebook and if they're monitoring this, because we saw in the example of the hurricane, we were seeing the information firsthand, and yet we question, should we take it off? But that really gets people more upset if you start omitting their post. So, but just as much as you're reading it, someone should be monitoring it. And acting fast is so vital. I think I've touched on that a couple of times. After the fact, take advantage of the internet to feed positive information. The more positive information you get out there will take precedence over your negative post. So that's why using Facebook and keep using it for positive news is so worthwhile. Enlist reliable and credible sources to also tell your story. Turn to your experts that aren't necessarily working for your community. Turn to your architect, or turn to the police, or turn to someone with the health department. You have those people discuss the situation so that it's taken off you and you're going to others. I think it's so important. We mentioned knowing your media, but having a list of your local media with their email addresses and telephone numbers. Have their 24-hour numbers available. And I mentioned also, I'm reiterating, if someone doesn't sound legitimate, because it could be somebody posing as a reporter just to try to get some additional information. So this is important that you also carry with you and know who will do this. And it's so important to update this. I mean, reporters are changing all the time, so keep it updated so that you have it when you need it. And finally, not only prepare in advance of the crisis, but after the fact, when you have your debriefings, review, reflect, and regroup. There will always be a crisis at your community. This is the nature of our business. So not only are you prepared for handling the crisis, but you're also prepared for handling the negative publicity that could be generated. So that really summarizes my comments. I think that we are going to discuss and answer a couple of questions that you may have. So I'll turn it back to Robert for some questions.
Yes, thank you, Janice. Can you actually just pull to the contact page, just so if anyone does have any questions, they can reach out to us directly and follow up with us there. So we actually have a couple questions here. One of them says, a resident's daughter accused a company employee and contacted the local consumer investigation reporter. How should the community handle this?
I think that's a good question. So just to reiterate it, there was a daughter of a resident contacted the consumer reporter to complain about an issue. I think that's learning, that's assessing the situation has to be done first. And I don't think that that will necessarily spiral, but it's important to assess the situation, see what it's all about, and try to work with her. Obviously, it's an operations issue that has that potential to spiral. So she's dissatisfied, she wants some type of satisfaction, she's frustrated, so she's taken it to the next level to vent her frustration. And so then if the investigative reporter calls or you could turn around and call them and get a jump on it and share with them what the situation is and what's being done to rectify it. So I think that's a situation of assessing and honestly dealing with that issue.
Okay, thank you. We actually have a related question. When is the correct time to speak to the media in a crisis situation? Do you wait for the media to contact you, or do you contact them to get a jump on the story?
I go back to this assessing. I think you have to assess what the crisis is, and it's hard for me to give a blanket, well, you should call them, without knowing the specific crisis. Obviously, the fire at the community, they will be alerted to that. But they probably won't come out if there aren't injuries and if it's just a small kitchen fire. If there were injuries, they might come out. And they're going to be getting their information through the authorities. So I don't think that I would necessarily go to a reporter unless it was I think I would probably wait until they come to me, but I would be prepared in case they come to me. I knew how to handle it.
Okay. We have another question. What is the best way, Janice, to media train executives?
I think that there are media training specialists out there. There's your trade associations are very valuable in this, both Leading Age, Alpha, your state associations. If they aren't providing media training, and I think ASHA does as well, then you can hire consultants to come and do media training with your executives. And it's very important that they use videotaping so that somebody can see themselves on camera in case it's a larger company that could be, that television and electronic media could be used. So you need to, it's not only sitting in a classroom, it's really important in media training that you have some interacting and that someone poses as a reporter and asks the questions and puts you on the spot. So I think that's really, really helpful. And when you're trying to find somebody to do media training, those would be the questions you would be asking. It's much more than just sitting in a classroom taking notes. You want somebody who's really going to put you on the firing line and help you answer those questions.
Thank you again, Janice. We have another question here. How do we best handle negative reviews on review websites like Yelp?
Well, Robert, I think your company is now initiating those. I frankly think this is fantastic. I think that just like Yelp is used for restaurants, it's an opportunity for people to share how they feel, and that they should be monitored. It could also be opportunities that very constructive things are being put out there. Not on Yelp, but on Facebook, we had a situation where someone posted a picture of a drain that was stopped up on the property that was on a walking path, that it was an oversight. And so we went back online on Facebook and we thanked this person for their information. We brought it to the community's attention. The community cleaned it up very quickly and responded. We put another picture, not to everybody, but just to the person. We provided them with a picture of the situation, how it had been improved. So we were able to take a situation that could have spiraled and respond. So I think that a negative review on Yelp, it's important to find out, is there validity to it?
Again, and I would also add to that, Janice, that on our website, retirementhomes.com, it's something worth noting that we actually just introduced about 6 weeks ago a review section on our site. So what happens is that, the members of the public can review a senior living community, but what's unique about this is that you can respond directly to the posters. So if it's negative or positive, and of course it's an opportunity to essentially turn a negative review into hopefully an open dialogue, which could eventually, become a prospect, a lead, or a move-in. So it's just, it's a matter of turning it from something potentially damaging into something potentially beneficial. And we have another question. Is it appropriate to refute incorrect or damaging information from the media, and if so, how?
It's very difficult. You can, if you have the correct information, you can go back to them and share it with them. You could email it to them, you could call. But, many, many times people will say, oh, we want a retraction. Well, I don't even know if the President of the United States gets everything, retracted. So some of it you just have to, as I use the expression, weather the storm. You could bring the incorrect information to their attention very nicely in case they are doing any follow-up, that this is the situation. But then you also have to be careful that you aren't trying to be self-serving. So it's a good question. And I think it deserves like a one-on-one looking at it, like what we're really talking about here and how you want to refute it. If it's a statistic, you can bring another statistic to their attention and the sources.
And finally, we have time for just one more question, Janice. How do you deal with negative rumors about your community?
Well, that's interesting. That's why I really am a proponent, and it's a service that my company provides. We do mystery shopping, and we recommend mystery shopping your competition with really very believable mystery shoppers, whether it's telephone calls or sending live shoppers in, to really understand what your competition is saying, because salespeople will sometimes say anything to try to dissuade somebody. So if there's negative rumors out there, I think it's important to assess the situation, what's being said, and then figure out a strategy on how you're going to counter this. And it's not just to refute it, but let's say someone is saying that your community has had such and such happen, that people have died of food poisoning or whatever. You need to then plan events, plan things that are very positive, that bring people into your community. It's a strategy. It's just not one thing. So it's stepping back, analyzing what's being said, who's saying it, are they credible, is it really affecting you, and then having a plan put into place that's, as I said, not just one thing. So you start feeding very positive information on Facebook. You start having events, getting people in to see your community for themselves. And some of it just takes time to go away. But you want to make sure you're covering your bases, that your customer service is good, and that there's no fuel, that there's nothing really, that the rumors are truly incorrect.
Okay, thank you very much again, Janice, for that fascinating presentation. It was a great insight on media and crisis communications. Again, it was Janice Ehlers of the Ehlers Group, and her contact as well as mine is all available right there on the screen. We have a webinar next month as well in September. with Lisa Legier of Dixon Hughes Goodman on the best financial practices for senior living communities. All that information will be sent out, as well as the slide deck and the recording of this webinar as well. Also, retirementhomes.com is once again launching our Mamba Awards, the best and most creative marketing programs used by senior living communities. For more information, again, we'll email all of that out at retirementhomes.com/Mamba, M-O-M-B-A. It's a public voting in 10 different categories, everything from best website to best resident events. And winners receive a trophy, exposure, and they will be awarded their prizes at Leading Age this year in Dallas. So again, all that information will be sent out as well. So contact me, there you go, Robert at retirementhomes.com for more information on the Mamba Awards or for your spot for September's webinar, and then visit retirementhomes.com for more information. Thank you very much. Have a great day.